Nobody noticed him, but that day, the boy they thought invisible would silence the entire school with nothing but music. Elijah Turner walked through the polished halls of Lincoln High with his head down, worn-out shoes squeaking softly against the tile. He was the scholarship kid, the charity case. A poor black boy from Eastwood who didn't belong among the sons and daughters of CEOs and senators. He wasn't supposed to be here, and everyone made sure he knew it. From the moment he entered the building, the looks were the same: disgusted, amused, or worse. Empty, as if he didn't exist. Teachers didn't bother to learn his name. Classmates whispered cruel things behind his back, sometimes right to his face. Did he find those shoes in a dumpster? Bet his house has rats, but Elijah didn't respond. He just kept walking, because Elijah had learned long ago that dignity wasn't about what you wore, it was about how you carried yourself. And what no one knew, not yet, was that behind his silence was a gift that lived in his hands. A gift passed down through the calloused fingers of his grandmother, Marta in their cramped home back in Eastwood. There was one precious thing, a broken-down piano with yellowed keys. Elijah spent hours there every day after school, teaching himself Chopin from photocopies, learning Beethoven by feel. Music wasn't a hobby. It was survival. His world didn't make sense until he touched those keys, but Lincoln High didn't care about talent. They cared about lineage, and on his very first week, someone decided to put him in his place. It was Principal Whitaker, tall, silver-haired, and sharp-eyed. A man who smiled like he meant well, but whose words were knives wrapped in velvet. "Do you play any instruments, Elijah?" he asked casually, finding the boy alone beneath a tree at lunch. Elijah, caught off guard, nodded softly. "Piano?" "A little," Whitaker smiled. A cold, calculated smile, very interesting. The next day, the teacher stood in front of the class with an announcement: as a special request from Principal Whitaker, the opening act of this year's talent show will be Elijah Turner. The room exploded with laughter. Someone clapped mockingly. Connor, blonde, wealthy, and always first to throw stones, leaned back in his chair and grinned. "Can't wait to see this comedy act." Elijah sat frozen. He understood. He wasn't being honored. He was being humiliated, set up to fail in front of the entire school that afternoon. As he walked home, shame burned through his chest. But just when it became too much, he remembered something: his grandmother's eyes when he played. The way she smiled like she was hearing a miracle. If they wanted a joke on stage, fine. He'd give them a performance they'd never forget, and from that moment on, the joke wasn't on Elijah anymore. It was on everyone who underestimated him. Elijah didn't sleep that night. He lay in his small bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft ticking of the wall clock and the distant hum of the city beyond their thin walls. The words from the classroom echoed in his head: Connor's laughter, the teacher's indifferent tone, and Whitaker's cold smile. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a setup, but Elijah wasn't planning to run. Down in the basement, beneath the creaking floorboards and flickering light bulb, the piano waited for him. Its chipped keys were uneven, and its wood worn thin, but to Elijah, it was holy ground. And tonight, it would become his battleground. Every afternoon after school, Elijah trained like a soldier. No coach, no cheering crowd. Just him, his trembling fingers, and the ghost of his grandmother's voice reminding him, "Play it like you mean it, baby, even if it breaks you." And some nights, it nearly did. His hands cramped. His eyes burned. His heart ached, but he played on. Each note became a memory. Each scale a scar. Each melody a vow. He wasn't just learning a song. He was preparing a reckoning. Meanwhile, at school, the mockery intensified. Flyers went up, fake ones with Elijah's face edited into clown costumes. Connor called it marketing, The teachers turned a blind eye. Even Principal Whitaker smirked when the posters crossed his desk. The entire school expected a disaster, but Elijah just kept playing. Even when the cafeteria burst into laughter as someone played distorted piano noises over the loudspeaker. Even when someone poured water in his locker, soaking his music sheets, he didn't break, because every attack became fuel, and in the shadows, someone else noticed, Miss Kendrick, a quiet, reserved music teacher who rarely spoke above a whisper. She had watched Elijah from afar. She had seen students like him before chewed up and spit out by the system. But Elijah was different. He had something most didn't. Fire. One evening, as Elijah packed up his things after class, she approached. "I heard you're performing at the talent show," she said softly. He nodded. "You practicing?" "Every day," he replied. "Good," she said, handing him an old, worn-out book of classical pieces. "This one's hard. But I think you can handle it." She didn't say anything else. But that moment meant everything. It was the first time someone at Lincoln High believed in him. The days ticked by. The whispers continued. But Elijah stayed focused, locked in, determined. And Whitaker? He waited patiently, confidently. He thought the boy would crumble, but what he didn't realize was that Elijah wasn't just preparing a performance. He was preparing a revolution, one that would begin with a single note and end with a silence so powerful even the cruelest voices wouldn't dare laugh again. The day had come. The talent show buzzed through Lincoln High like electricity. Glittering banners hung from the ceiling. The auditorium was filled to capacity, and whispers flooded the air like smoke before a fire. But they weren't here to be moved. They were here to mock. Backstage, Elijah stood alone. His hands were cold, his throat dry, but his eyes focused. Through a crack in the curtain, he saw them, Connor and his friends in the front row, already laughing. Mr. Whitaker, arms crossed, leaning against the side wall like a king watching a court jester prepare to humiliate himself. They didn't come to listen. They came to witness a fall. The announcer's voice rang through the speakers. "Please welcome to the stage Elijah Turner." There was clapping, but not the kind that welcomed. It was slow, sarcastic, cruel, and yet Elijah stepped forward. Each footstep felt heavier than the last. But he kept going. He didn't bow. He didn't smile. He simply sat at the piano, took a breath, and closed his eyes. Then silence, a kind of silence so full it made the room feel too loud. His fingers touched the keys softly at first, like testing water before diving in. Then a ripple. The first notes flowed, fragile but clear, delicate yet unwavering. The auditorium froze. No one expected this. The music grew bolder, deeper. His hands, once trembling, now danced with precision. He wasn't playing a song. He was telling his story. Every measure carried the sound of a life that had known loss, ridicule, perseverance. Every chord struck a wound he had once tried to hide, and every crescendo said one thing: "I am not your joke." Connor's smirk disappeared. The snickers faded. Even Whitaker, watching from the wings, shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't pity. This was power. When the final note hit a soft, haunting E-flat, it hung in the air, like smoke from a candle just blown out. And then, thunder. Applause erupted, not out of obligation, but students stood. Teachers stood. Even those who once turned their backs now faced him with trembling admiration. Whitaker's face went blank. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be the moment Elijah broke. Instead, he rose, the quiet boy from Eastwood, wearing 2 small shoes and second-hand clothes, had just silenced an auditorium full of people who once believed he didn't belong. Elijah bowed briefly, not for show, for respect. Then he walked off stage without looking back. But as he passed Whitaker in the wings, their eyes met, and no words were spoken. They weren't needed, because in that moment, the balance of power had shifted, and it wasn't in the hands of the man with the suit and the title. It was in the hands of the boy who played like his life depended on it, because it did, and he won. The applause didn't stop even after Elijah left the stage. It roared through the auditorium like a storm that refused to fade. Some students stood on their seats. Others wiped tears they didn't expect to cry. And at the edge of it all, Principal Whitaker stood frozen, still trying to make sense of what just happened. His plan had collapsed. What was meant to humiliate had transformed into triumph. The next morning, Lincoln High felt different. Teachers who had never said Elijah's name before greeted him with nods of respect. Students who once snickered in hallways now held doors open and offered seats. Even Connor, too proud to speak, lowered his eyes when they passed each other. But the real change was deeper. In classrooms, in conversations, in the air. Miss Kendrick, the quiet music teacher who had always believed in Elijah, finally stepped forward. With a fire in her voice that no one had heard before, she announced a new initiative, an open art program called Voces da Escola, Voices of the School. It would give students like Elijah, Jenny, and Miguel the ones Whitaker had silenced the stage they had always deserved. But Whitaker wasn't finished, threatened and cornered. He tried to block the program, citing school policy, safety, funding. But it was too late. He no longer had control because this time, the school stood with Kendrick. The students rallied. The parents backed them. Even alumni returned to offer help. And when Whitaker attempted to shut it down entirely, Kendrick responded with calm defiance. If we can't use your stage, we'll build our own. And they did. That Friday, the schoolyard turned into a festival. Handmade banners danced in the wind. Folding chairs lined the grass. A simple wooden platform served as the stage. There were no velvet curtains, no fancy lights, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the truth being heard. When Elijah stepped onto the stage for his final performance before moving on to the music academy, the crowd held its breath. And as his fingers touched the keys, something remarkable happened. Every note became a declaration of survival, of pride, of freedom. People didn't just hear him. They felt him, and in that moment, the ground under Whitaker's legacy cracked wide open. A week later, investigators arrived. Whistleblowers stepped forward. Teachers spoke out. Miss Kendrick handed over years' worth of evidence, emails, altered reports, quiet coercions. The truth poured out like light through broken glass. Whitaker was suspended, and this time, no one defended him. He had underestimated the power of one student, the love of one grandmother, the courage of one teacher, and it cost him everything. When the new school year began, Lincoln High wasn't just different. It was alive. Under Kendrick's leadership, art and equity flourished. Scholarship programs expanded. Every student, regardless of where they came from, had a voice, and Elijah. He stood tall not just as a student, but as a symbol of what happens when the underestimated rise, because the boy they once laughed at had become the sound that shattered silence. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that talent has no price tag and that dignity can't be silenced, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel for more stories like Elijah's tales of resilience, justice, and voices that refuse to be ignored, because somewhere, someone just like Elijah is still waiting for their moment. And you might be the reason they believe it's possible.